Good morning. It's Saturday. That means it's time for Right On SC. This is Kasie Whitener here with you from the studios in Columbia, South Carolina, 100.7 The Point. If you're listening live on the radio, like I said, 100% of The Point, or you can go and listen on the internet at makethepointradio.com. It's me, Kasie, and my good friend Rex. Good morning, Rex.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm doing good.
So it's Saturday in Columbia, and it was supposed to be raining, and it's not. It's going to be beautiful, I think. And we've got a lot of really cool stuff planned today. We're going out to Finley Park to share some supplies and some food and some coats with some of our houseless neighbors that live at Finley Park. So that'll be cool. That's the Libertarian Party doing that at 10 o'clock this morning. So if you're here in Columbia and you want to join us out at Finley Park, we'd be glad to meet with you, talk a little bit about the Libertarian Party, and also be sharing our bounty with our houseless neighbors. So that's pretty cool. And then it's...
Make me seem like a jerk.
Well, no, I'm just now inviting
it.
you right now on the air.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
It's going to be raining.
It's not going to be raining. And then it's Soda City Day in Columbia. So the weather.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the weather's starting to get where they're not going to have very many more of these, and so it's a great place to do some Christmas shopping is at Soda City Market because there's a lot of local artisans down there. And one of my students actually is a crochet artist, and so she's got some stuff that we're going to go down and buy Holly a new scarf, and excited about that. And then, bigger than ever, it's Army-Navy Day. Yes.
What?
Go Navy beat Army.
Oh.
What are you talking about? What?
Okay.
It's the biggest football game of the year. I know everybody wants to think the national championship is, but it's not. Army-Navy Day is the biggest football game of the year. So I'm here in my army in my Navy clothes. Yesterday I went over to one of my colleagues at the Darla Moore School. Pat Hanley is a Army alum, and I went over and talked a little smack to him, tried to get him to make a bet on the game with me. And
Okay.
yeah,
That's a difficult game to bet on because it's not like you can follow the team all year long.
yeah, no, well, I mean, I follow him all year because my dad's a Navy grad, but.
Okay.
But yeah, so no, but you're right. Like they're not in the top, 10, 15, 25 or whatever. So you're not seeing a lot of Army Navy. So you don't really know how well they play.
Right.
But Navy had a really good season. They played really well this year. And so I'm excited about it. They've lost the last 3 in a row, though. Army's been dominating the series for the last few years. So hopefully we'll have a good game. That's on at 3 o'clock today. And then the last thing we're doing today, I'm excited about this too, which is super dumb. But we have our faculty Christmas party tonight. And I know most people are like, oh, kill me. I don't want to go to my company Christmas party. But a lot of times I don't get to see any of these people except for this one time.
Right.
So it's people that I just
or
pass
talk
in the
to
hall.
them about anything.
Yeah, and I just pass them in the hall. And yesterday, like I said, I was hanging out with my friend Pat and then and talked to a couple of other colleagues. I got really excited about this party tonight. So that's it. Like a long, super exciting, very, very busy Saturday. But really, I wanted to invite our people here that are listening to us to come out either to Finley Park at 10 o'clock this morning or out to Soda City because Columbia's got just a lot to offer. Just a lot to offer.
I'd go, but my boss is making me work.
On a Saturday?
On a Saturday. I work every Saturday.
I should be working. I should be grading exams,
Yes.
but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to watch football instead. All right, shh, don't tell anybody. All right, so today's episode, this is Right On SC, and I know I've been kind of rambling on since I got here just because I've had some coffee already. But today's episode is about fairy tales, and it came out last week when we were talking about the femme fatale and the damsel in distress, and we had this conversation around whether or not the damsel in distress of fairy tales has any sense of agency. Like, can she actually affect her own outcomes? And I think we agreed that no, the key to the damsel in distress is that she is in fact in distress and must be saved.
Right.
And so we started talking about how nowadays when I love that phrase, my students use it all the time. Nowadays, these days when we see a lot of these modern young adult novels, they're retelling of these fairy tales. And the idea behind the retelling is to give those damsels in distress more agency.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to talk about today.
All right, that's fine. Well, it's a natural progression. I mean, these are stories that have been told and told and retold over time. I mean, they were only cemented mostly by the Brothers Grimm back in the 16th century. And they
why?
themselves did not come up with it. They collected old folk tales. So these stories have been with us forever. So as time goes on, then they all became Disneyfied.
Disneyfied.
They did.
I love that. It's like an actual adjective. You've been Disneyfied.
Well, I mean, the original Sleeping Beauty is not the same story as in the Brothers Grimm version.
Right. No. Well, so let's talk about the familiarity of them.
And now those characters, which were basically just MacGuffins, the object of the quest, become, actual characters with flaws.
That was so well packed. So they're MacGuffins.
They are MacGuffins.
So start with that. What is a MacGuffin?
Okay, the MacGuffin is the object of the quest, the thing everyone's looking for. I think Hitchcock came up with that.
So we think of the
There's so many of his movies.
Right.
That everyone's searching for something, and you don't know what it is. The main character doesn't know what it is, and it doesn't really matter what it is.
Right.
What matters is the chase.
Gotcha. And so in the case of Sleeping Beauty, while we think it's Sleeping Beauty's story, it's not, because she's unconscious for most of the story, right?
Yeah.
She's the object of the quest, meaning that the prince is in the story. He's going after the dragon to be able to save the princess.
She's the MacGuffin. She's the object. She's the prize. And by the way, if you really want to, the original Sleeping Beauty tale is pretty twisted because the prince doesn't wake her up with a kiss.
Okay. Oh, and it's all about consent, and we should have a conversation around that.
Pretty much. Yeah, he rapes her.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's in the Brothers Grimm version.
That's terrible.
And she gives birth to twins.
Oh, you know what? I did read that in my research for today's show.
And then one of the babies sucks looking for a nipple, sucks the piece of wood out of her finger.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awful.
I know.
Everything about that is terrible.
So, it was a good thing they Disneyfied it.
Yeah. One would think that the G-rated version is a whole lot better than that. All right, so when we talked about, in the past, we've talked about these 7 basic plots, which are sort of the familiar structures of dramatic stories or of comedic stories, right? And I think that's the key to these fairy tales is that they are familiar. We do know them so well that it's almost like you come in with an understanding that you've already set the expectations. This is a Cinderella story. So this is going to be a rags to riches story.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have somebody who's sort of down and out. The odds are against her, but she's scrappy and she's going to find a way to rise above her station and have
that's
at the
not
end,
the Cinderella story.
riches.
Cinderella's story, she cannot rise above her station without the intervention of the other. The supernatural element comes in and magically makes it happen.
Right. Okay. So the difference between the rags to riches story of like a Rocky where he fights
his way up, literally,
versus a Cinderella where the fairy godmother makes this happen for her.
Yes, the fairy godmother or the spirit of the dead mother comes back in a form of a dove or anyone, however you want to do it. Some spirit animal.
But even in that case, I mean, she can make her beautiful all day long, but she still has to win the prince over.
Yeah, but all she has to do is show up.
Well, in the Disney version, all she has to do is show up, right?
Right.
But there are additional versions of this particular story where it's her being clever, it's her being smart, it's her being charming. There's other ways that she's able to win the prince.
At the end of the day, it's all about her being beautiful.
I was going to say, he's only willing to look at her, though, because she's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And until she was made beautiful, he wasn't willing to take a look.
Because she couldn't even show up at the thing.
All right, we got to run to break. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk more about fairy tales. I swear we're not going to spend the entire episode on Cinderella.
Though we could.
Are. There's a ton of other really good ones to dig into. This episode is Right On SC. You can get the show notes out on the blog, writeonsc.blog. We're also out on Twitter at #RightOnSC. Listen live on the internet at makethepointradio.com. A little shout out to our internet listeners. I know we've got a few of them around the state and around the world. I think those are all my little housekeeping pieces. We also have a big announcement coming, so don't go away because that big announcement is not going to be until, of course, the end of the show. Maybe at the half-hour mark. Maybe we'll make the announcement at the half-hour mark.
All right.
But we've got some news to share with you. If you want to support Right On SC, go out to patreon.com/RightOnSC and become a patron. You can join for $5 a month and take care of us, take care of the radio show, and we would just love that. So there's behind the scenes and extra content available for our patrons. All right, we're going to break. When we come back, more on fairy tales and the retelling thereof. This is Right On SC. Kasie and Rex here with you on 100.7 The Point.
Columbia's local talk radio experience. The Point.
Now at 100.7 FM and 1470 AM.
I love a quick commercial break. Good morning, we're back. It's Right On SC. Kasie and Rex here with you on a Saturday morning out of Columbia, South Carolina. You can listen live on the radio at 100.7 The Point, but then also, of course, makethepointradio.com. So those of you who are listening online, thank you for being out there with us. Go see the show notes, writeonsc.blog. I'm actually using the show notes from the website today. So there's that. I don't know that anybody cares, but it's interesting to me. All right, so here we go. We were talking about fairy tales and whether or not these damsel in distress characters like Rapunzel, like Cinderella, like Sleeping Beauty, whether or not these women are given agency in some of these retelling. And I found this cool blog on the fantasy. There's a fantasy publisher called Tor, Tor. Those of you who are writing fantasy novels or you read fantasy novels, you know Tor because they publish a ton of fantasy. They probably put out 12 or 15 titles a year. Do you think 12, 15
Oh,
titles a
yeah.
year? Easily.
Without a doubt. Tor's been around forever.
Yeah, they're the biggest in the genre. But anyway, they have on their website, their blogger came up with this reasons why people are remaking fairy tales. And so I want to kind of touch on a few of those. Like I said, they're out in the show notes at writeonsc.blog.
First one would probably be because they're universal. Everyone knows them.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So the familiarity creates for you preset expectations. And you don't, as a writer, then have to build the frame of what it is you're going to be doing because they know.
Same with the Marvel movies. I mean, parents now grew up with these Marvel. They know these stories, so they can share them with the kids, and there's a shared nostalgia between them. Future nostalgia and past nostalgia.
Well, I don't know about the Marvel movies. Here's what I would say. I think that in our generation, the parents that grew up with them, I think that was niche. I don't think that was widespread.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't grow up with those Marvel movies. I think the first few
comics,
that I saw
the
were
comics.
yeah, but I didn't read comics.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So I think there's
maybe it's a man thing.
Well, maybe because Charlie did read a lot of those comics, and
Right.
he does have this deeper understanding of the Marvel universe than I do. I mean, I really have been exposed over the last few years, just when the films came out and started getting popular. I mean, it's the last few years.
What
It's
did you read when you were a
so.
kid?
I told you, V.C. Andrews.
Oh, V.C. Andrews. Yeah. Oh, that's so much better.
Chicklet is the earliest chicklet.
I don't even call it chicklet.
Yeah.
I call it sleazelit.
Oh man.
I know, but every
Seriously.
12-year-old girl read.
Yeah, we totally did. Mary Sturgill was on the show, remember? And she and I
Yeah.
were talking about that's why we started writing was because of V.C. Andrews.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, she's fantastic. All right, so
yeah, that's right.
I mean, I say that if I go to pick up if I picked it up today, I would probably be horribly disappointed. So, but anyway, so here's some of the reasons
Oh
that
no, it's just
our
as
blogger
sleazy
gives
as
us.
ever.
Our-
I read it about 8 years ago, and about 5 years ago, and it's just as sleazy and trashy as ever, and really easy to read.
yeah,
You can blow through it.
I was 12,
Yeah,
13.
exactly, and you blew through it. So
Yeah.
nowadays it's even easier.
Well, that's one of those terrible compliments where somebody says things like, "Well, if you can do it, I can do it."
Yeah.
Right? And that's how I felt about V.C. Andrews. If she can do it, I can do it. It's horrible. May she rest in peace. All right, so let's go back to our fairy tale conversation, though. So I want
Okay.
to talk about the idea that these fairy tales are not only familiar, but they're basic. They're so basic. There's no real depth to them. There's no real complications to them. You don't see turning points 5, 6, and 7. You see turning point 1, and that's it. You know what I mean?
There's no internal struggle with the character.
No, not at all. And so because of that, because it's such a basic frame, there's so much opportunity. You can do so much with it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Oh, there's plenty of room for growth.
So I think probably where I first got interested in this, did you read any of the Jeffrey Maguire books? Did you read Wicked?
No, I did not.
So Wicked's fantastic in that it's a retelling of the Wizard of Oz story from the perspective of the witch, right? And for one thing, he has to explain why she melts when she gets wet, right? How does somebody live their whole life and then melt when they get wet? How was she able to avoid water all this time? How did she bathe and things like that? Like those sort of basic questions that you have about the Wizard of Oz that maybe you didn't have them, but Jeffrey Maguire had them. And so he wrote this story from her perspective. And he gives you all this great political upheaval that's happening in Oz that Dorothy just sort of wanders into. She's kind of it's a accident that she even shows up, right? Which we know that from Oz anyway. But because that story is told from Dorothy's point of view, it's of the 7 basic plots, it's the journey and the return, right?
Right.
So Dorothy's point of view is that she goes away, and when she comes back, things are different. She feels differently about her home, about Kansas, right? But in the case of Wicked, he takes it from Alpheba's point of view, and he says, what happens when this person shows up and disrupts everything I've been working my whole life for? And so you had to get all this exposition in the way. It was super cool. I mean, it was the first time I'd read anything that took something I knew so well and completely turned it inside out. And I thought that was fantastic. I was addicted. I couldn't put him down.
Yeah, I did notice the book seems to be about 3 times the size of the actual Wizard of Oz novel.
Well, remember that The Wizard of Oz, again, because it's from an outsider's perspective, you
Right.
don't know the politics that are happening in Oz. But Jeffrey Maguire gives you the full background of what's the class system here and how do people treat one another. And I mean, it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. So he does that with Wicked. Then he, like a lot of really good authors that get addicted to their characters, he can't stop. And so he writes Son of a Witch, which is about, of course, Elpheba's son, which was a really good book as well. And then he tries it again with the Cinderella story with Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister. And I don't think that one was quite as good, but he still does a great job of looking at it from a new perspective. And that's one of the advantages of taking on these fairy tales is you can just move the camera angle, right, out of somebody's perspective that we're looking at it all the time
Right.
into somebody else's.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But I don't know. Is it now played out? First of all, it always seems to be the female characters that are now the protagonists.
Yeah.
You
Why?
always see it, yeah, and you never see it from the male perspective. You never see Prince Charming's point of view.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Now that would be interesting, yes.
Yeah. And he in the Disney version, right, of Cinderella, for
And it's always the
example.
redeeming of the villain mostly, because there's the other one, Maleficent or
Yeah, Maleficent.
Maleficent. That's
There's
it.
2 Maleficent films. Yeah. Angelina Jolie couldn't get enough of that. So yeah, I think you're right. There's a sense of either and Holly's been reading these books that are all the villain books. There's one that's about Beast.
Yeah, those are more fun.
There's one that's about
Yeah, Beast, the spousal abuser.
yeah, that's where this whole topic came from. Was
Yeah.
our very disturbing Beauty and the Beast conversation last week. And then the other one is about the Sea Witch. She read the one about the Sea Witch
From
The
Sleeping-
Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid, yes.
Yeah, from the Sea. She read the Sea Witch's book, and then there was one about the Evil Queen from Snow White. Anyway, there's a whole series of these books that have been published that are all from the villain's perspective. And I
Oh, the
think that
female
came-
villain. You don't see one from Scar's point of view, do you?
No, wouldn't that be fascinating?
Yeah.
Though you should write that. The Scar Evil Lion point of view. The other series I was talking to you about was the Marissa Meyer's The Lunar Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
And the what Marissa Meyer does is she takes the same story. It's still a Cinderella story, but she puts it in this very futuristic. Really, there's a moon colony, and so the moon people are part of this. Hence, the Lunar Chronicles, and the tension between the Earth settlements and the moon settlements is really where the political tension there is really where a lot of that drama comes from.
Right.
But then the one character, Cinder, happens to have this sort of Cinderella story. And then there's one about Little Red Riding Hood. Story is called Scarlet.
Or you really want one that takes it, flips it. You should read Alan Moore's Lost Girls, which is basically pornography at this point. He takes Alice, Dorothy, and someone else from Peter Pan. Who's the name of the girl? Wendy. And he turns their tales. They all come together in this hotel, this Art Deco hotel, and he turns their tales into some pornographic.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a graphic novel.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful, really
Okay.
written, and it's tasteful in its own way. But
But the idea that so all of those are
he's
the
taking
journey.
he's taken it to the extreme.
They're all the journey and return story.
Yes.
So to compare them side by side would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I'm going to write that down. The Lost Girls.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's a 3-volume set.
Nice.
Yeah, it's one of those things he only became because he became super famous. He could do whatever he wants.
Oh, nice.
Because it started off as 3 issues published, and then collapsed because no one bought it. So he says, "I want to finish this," and then he says, "Write another 200 pages
Yeah.
and put it out as a graphic novel."
Well, you know what's interesting is that one of the perspectives that I found when I was assembling the show notes was that writing the fairy tale retell is a way to break in because it is so popular and it is so easy for your readers to grab a hold of and be interested in, that it's a way for you to then, after that, then you can write whatever you want, right? So it's interesting that this guy came back to the fairy tales when he had the privilege to write whatever he wanted, as opposed to somebody going, I really want to write about vampires, but the first thing I'm going to write about instead is Cinderella, right?
Well, he says he sort of destroyed the comic book field.
Okay.
Well, he did Watchmen, right?
The self-proclaimed destroyer of the comic
Wow,
book
he
field.
was incredibly influential, and then suddenly all the comic books turned dark after
Nice.
Watchmen, and so he tried to bring them back with another one. But he says well, he doesn't do superhero stuff anymore. He does the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Okay.
But I mean, That was his idea, because he always played with that sort of form.
Okay.
And he's always his best when he uses other people's work.
Yeah, no, look, I'm interested in that. I'm interested in when authors, because that's my other question for you, is like these retellings of these fairy tales, is it just fan fiction? Because that's
It's upper crust fan fiction.
I was gonna say, I felt like when I went into
if it's published, I mean, then it's no longer fan fiction.
Right.
I mean, 50 Shades of Grey was Twilight fan fiction, right? Then it got published, and it's not anymore.
50 Shades of Grey started out as Twilight fan fiction when
Exactly.
she was originally writing it.
So yeah, it is fan fiction to a certain degree.
Yeah, when you take somebody else's world and then you put your story in it.
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
So in that case, if that's true, then is it cheap? Is it a cheap way to get out of having to build all that stuff?
Not if people are interested. I mean, I guess it is. But then, I mean, there's more Sherlock Holmes stories that have been made and written than Arthur Conan Doyle wrote.
Right.
All right. There's been novels. He never wrote he wrote The Sign of Four, pardon me, but it was a very short novel.
Right.
Nowadays it'd be a novella. So, I mean, to make a story and have it come alive, I think it's just continuing a tradition. Like the old-fashioned traditions, like where they would pass a character down, like the Odyssey, and they tell the Odysseus' story, and you add a little here and you add a little there. It's the same sort of idea. I mean, again, there's more Dracula stories out there than Bram Stoker ever considered writing.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I think too, though, when you come into from a fan fiction perspective, sometimes it's about getting what you didn't get out of the original work, right?
Right.
So sometimes, I wrote this Neverland story, and the idea for me is I have this kind of a different perspective of what it must be like to live around a guy like Peter that doesn't want to grow up and refuses to allow things to change, right? And if you're desperate for change and somebody won't allow that change, how frustrating must that be, right?
Yes.
And so when I think of the retellings, the idea is to come into the story and say, what questions do you have that don't get answered by the original, and then to write a story that answers those questions.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, all right, all these retellings are always dark retellings. Well, they put an evil slant on something that's considered to be childish, and wonderful, right? It's supposed to bring wonder to to a child's mind, and then we come in and ruin it with a different view.
Well, yes. What was really happening was So, but I have that question about that too. Like, is that how far can you push it before somebody says to you, "I don't want to think of Peter Pan that way"?
I think Alan Moore pushed it as far as he could with Lost Girls.
You think so? You think that's it? Like, that's the end of the spectrum?
Well, that is the opposite end of the spectrum, essentially.
From the Disney films.
I know. For some reason, we're always using the Disney films as the baseline.
Right.
Where the old versions, and that's the other thing you do, bring the old versions back.
Right.
Because those are all new again. And those are not the ones we know.
And sometimes those old versions have pieces that are really intriguing. Like that, to me, that was the Peter Pan. If you go and read Peter and Wendy, Peter has short-term memory loss. He's like a stoner. I mean, it's like he doesn't remember anything that just happened. And you have to be that way.
He lives in the now, yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you can't not grow up if you continue to remember the lessons you learned yesterday. Like
right.
You have to grow up if you can remember. But if not, if you have short-term memory loss, then, right? So I think that's the thing is when I read the original Peter and Wendy, I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Let's talk about somebody who has intentional short-term memory loss, right? All right, we're going to run to break. On the other side of the break, more about the fairy tales that are being retold and why they're being retold and how they're being retold, and also some tips for how you can do it if that's something that you're interested in. We know it's a good way to get a lot of readers, as a matter of fact. Go out to the show notes. They're at writeonsc.blog. We've got a big announcement coming. Don't go away. This is 100.7 The Point. Kasie and Rex here with you on Right on SC. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. It's Right on SC. Kasie and Rex here with you on a Saturday morning from Columbia, South Carolina. We've been talking about fairy tales and the retelling of fairy tales, and I've been teasing you all saying we've got an announcement to make, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you what that announcement is, just in case you have to get out of the car, and we'll repeat it again at the end of the episode. But next year in 2020, we're going to start a book club here in Columbia that will be local authors being read every month. So we'll pick a book each month, pick an author each month, and then on Saturday morning, the last Saturday of the month, right after our show, we'll go over to Sunrise Artisan in 5 Points with Tazima Brown, who runs the show Evolve on this same station on Saturday nights, and we'll go and talk about the book, and we'll meet the author, we'll get signed copies, and we'll have a good time over there. So it's going to be the last Saturday of the month. It's going to be local authors, and we're going to announce that author lineup here in the next week or so. If you're a local author and you want to be featured in our local authors book club in 2020, you need to send us a message. You probably ought to go out to patreon.com/writeonsc and become a patron of the show. You support us, we'll support you. And let's talk about how we can include you in this local author book club. If you're just a reader and you want to come and hang out with some live authors, local authors, get to know the people who are writing the books that you love, we'll be glad to have you. And Tazima will talk more about that on her show, hopefully later on tonight. If not tonight, then sometime soon. We've got big official announcements coming out. So anyway, that's the big news. We've been talking about fairy tales this morning.
Absolutely.
And as we went to break, you said, we've got to talk about Beauty and the Beast.
Right,
And I was
because
like,
we have wildly different views.
please don't. Okay, go. Go
All
ahead
right.
and tell
well,
us.
my view is it's probably one of the most destructive fairy tales around. It has an absolutely terrible moral. You know, she's taken in by this abusive, loud person, right, who she eventually changes into her prince, right?
Right.
All right. He's this abusive, bestial person who throws things and has tantrums and can't control himself. And the story is, you know, girls, just stick with that guy. You know, no matter how abusive it is, and eventually you can turn him into your Prince Charming, your perfect man.
I'm not going to deny that that's true, that it is the most that it is the most destructive, because we had a whole conversation around 50 Shades of Grey when the film first came out. Some of the women that I was working with, we were talking about whether or not you're going to go see the film and the book, and there was a whole lot of conversation about how that book perpetuates this myth that you can change a bad man into your prince. And I think you're right. Like, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, because the bad boys are attractive. They're alluring. They're a challenge, right?
You know what makes it even worse, though, is in this case, he's not.
Yes, he is.
He's a beast. He's ugly. He's furry. He's an animal. I mean, he's literally an animal.
Right.
And so it's not as if he's this uber
Who kidnaps
hot.
her? Who kidnaps her?
Yeah.
Brainwashes her, and then she eventually changes him into something good.
Yeah. I know. Look, you
She's the fairy tale Patty Hearst.
oh God, come on now. So I'm going to go. So the opposite view of this particular story, right, is that there's a sense of beauty is within, right? And so the inner person is what really matters, and who that person is should be given a chance to bloom and to grow, and people should give a chance to get to know that person. And here's this beast character who is selfish, and he's angry, and he has all these, this baggage that he has to work through. And then she helps him to see that you don't have to be defined by the worst day in your life. And because of that, he becomes a better person. He starts doing better things. He stops yelling at her. He stops throwing things. Like his temper changes. So in this case, here's the thing about Beauty and the Beast.
His bad temper will always be changed.
He actually changes. Now, how frequently does that happen? Like, pretty much never, ladies. Just get out, right? Like that doesn't usually happen, which is why I agree with you that it's a very poisonous story.
She's the enabler.
But he, in this case, in the story of Beauty and the Beast, he evolves and he changes.
I think the ugly duckling does that one better. It's the exact same moral, only without the spousal abuse.
Well, yeah, you know what? Maybe that's it. Maybe we just go with Black Swan and be done with it, right? I mean, in which case we're not dealing with sexual politics. Yeah, okay. So our treatment of Beauty and the Beast, I think probably why I was hesitant even to have that conversation is because I do so much love the Disney version of Beauty and the Beast. I love the music. I love the fact that Belle wants a bigger life for herself, and she
trades up for...
But it's courage when she sacrifices herself for her father, and it's courage when she takes on the beast as far as standing up to him and those kinds of things. Like, I think that there's a redeeming piece there. We're not talking about a woman who's cowering and waiting for him to come around. She's not begging him to change. She's forcing that. She does have agency. She does have a sense of, I'm what's at risk. If you want me, this has to be different. You have to be different. And so I am, in a way, attracted to that story, because I think that the people that love you should bring out the best in you. And if you're worthy of their love, you will be the very best version of yourself when you're around them. And so there's my side of that story. It doesn't have to be spousal abuse. It can, in fact, be redeeming, and it can be wonderful.
Wow.
Ha! All right. So we did say we were not going to spend the whole time on Cinderella, and now we've spent a lot of time on Beauty and the Beast. But the Lunar Chronicles, which I mentioned before, is Marissa Meyer's story, and she goes through a couple of them because she also gives us the Rapunzel story in the book Cress, and she gives us the Snow White story in the book Winter. And I think the key to the Rapunzel story is the fact that Rapunzel is a prisoner. And Rapunzel, because she's a prisoner, doesn't have worldly experience. She doesn't understand what's happening in the world. And I love the Rapunzel story because of that. She has this naivete where she trusts people that she probably shouldn't trust. And this is another one of those where the original story is brutal. She ends up impregnated as well. Mm-hmm. In the original Rapunzel story, because her nightly visits with the prince, of course, he's grossly irresponsible as far as this is concerned, right? She doesn't know, but he does, and so that's terrible. But that's not the Tangled version. The Tangled version with Mandy Moore singing the soundtrack is a lot more tame than that. In that case, we have Rapunzel breaking out of prison and going on a mission. So she's got a little bit of a journey story happening. And then which I dug. Tangled is my favorite princess film. In fact, when we went to Disney World, I'm going to tell you this, my family's going to be like, what? You said that on the radio? We went to Disney World and the princesses came by in the parade, right?
Yeah.
We get there right as the parade is going by, and it's, and there's Snow White, no, there's Minnie Mouse, and all this kind of thing. And Rapunzel comes by, and I burst into tears. I mean, it was like anime, the tears flying off my face.
My God.
I was so excited to see Rapunzel in person. I just love her. I just absolutely love her. I think she, and maybe because it's Mandy Moore, I don't know, but there was something about that film, and maybe it was Holly's age when we watched it so much, but I just love that film. Tangled is my favorite.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So there you have it. And The Little Mermaid and Sleeping Beauty retells are also among some of these young adult titles that are being redone. And there's a great link in the show notes if you go out to writeonsc.blog. .blog.
I don't know how you can redo The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, I mean, like, what possible alterations could you tell of The Little Mermaid? She wants to be a human. End of story.
Yeah, and not only that, she sacrifices so much. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything.
She gives up her whole life for this prince.
And to live in constant pain.
Well, yeah. So that's the original story. That it's extraordinarily painful for her to be a human.
Right.
But of course not in the Disney film.
Yeah.
You don't see her suffering, except when he tosses her aside.
Well, that's because that's not an old-fashioned fairy tale. I mean, that was Hans Christian Andersen, and that was before all the really old ones come up.
Right.
Like Snow White and all of them.
Right. Oh, I have a lot of questions about Snow White. Like
Snow White and her sister Rose Red.
Specifically around the dwarfs.
Okay.
Like, so what are the dwarfs doing if they're mining all this stuff, but then they're not actually rich? Right? Like,
you go crazy if you...
Like, what are they actually mining? Like, what's the deal here?
Plutonium.
Yeah. For the time machine, Kasie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just have a lot of questions around Snow White because it is so vapid. Like, it's just so vapid. There's nothing there to the Snow White story that I have just a million questions around. What could you do? And it's been redone. It's been retold hundreds of times. And people have tried to take different angles. But the most interesting part of it is the queen, right? Is the evil queen and why she hates Snow White so much.
Because the central point of the story is no matter how beautiful you are, no matter how talented you are, someone will come along who will be more beautiful, more talented. So you just got to get used to it.
Do you think
no matter what, that's because no matter what, you can't stop it.
Do you think anybody learns that lesson from Snow White?
No.
Yeah. I mean, is there anybody that's watching Snow White going, well, I guess I better wait for my competition to show up and push me off my pedestal?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, really, it's about this woman who's.
Well, that's the only moral I get out of it.
Isn't it her? Is it her son? Isn't she the queen, and that's her, and it's her son that she's trying to protect from Snow White?
Depends on which version.
I mean, to me, it just sounds like the worst mother-in-law on the planet.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, but I don't know. That's probably also a terrible, terrible cliche.
Well, she's an extremely vain woman.
Yeah. Hence the mirror.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we've got, we could dive into symbols here and all the symbols that are in these fairy tales and how those are kind of multiplicitous.
Yes.
Multiplicitous? Is that a word? All right. We're going to do more on fairy tales when we come back on the other side of the break. We've got one break left, only one segment left. We mentioned that big announcement at the bottom of the hour, but we're also going to talk about it before the end of the show. And we have some notes and some shout outs for some of our South Carolina authors who have been engaging with us out on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/writeonsc, we'll be glad to share your news as well. We'll be right back. Don't go away. All right, we're back. It's Right on SC. Kasie and Rex here with you on Saturday morning from Columbia, South Carolina. Listen to us on the internet, makethepointradio.com. Shout out to all of our internet listeners. Glad to have you all with us. We talked about Beauty and the Beast in the last segment, so we're not going to beat that one down, but we have been talking about fairy tales through the whole episode. And then you mentioned while we were at break, I think at the bottom of the hour, about the protagonist or the antagonists being a lot of female on female.
Yeah, violence.
Violence. So, and then we started listing some of these male characters that show up in a few of them. And I mentioned Peter Pan, which is our Captain Hook versus Peter Pan.
Yeah.
It is the story.
It depends on who the protagonist is. The protagonist always seems to be going up against an older version of their own sex. All right? Peter Pan, the young, versus old Captain Hook.
Right.
That sort of stuff. Again, Snow White.
There's some great retellings of the Peter Pan stories. If you're a parent out there, you've got little kids, you've watched these, the Tinkerbell movies. And the Tinkerbell movies, of course, they focus on Tinkerbell, right? But they have all these great Pixie Hollow stories, and you see Captain Hook early on before he becomes a captain in The Pirate Fairy. And it's a great view of a young Captain Hook before he gets sort of corrupted by greed and before he ever encounters Peter Pan and all that. It's really super cool. So we were talking about how do you find a new angle in some of these old stories, and I like to think of the peripheral characters, right? So tell us about Tiger Lily, right? Like, let's hear about the natives in Peter Pan and in Neverland, right? Let's talk about what that's all about. Like, I think that's where, if you're going to be writing one of these retellings, you got to kind of go through and really dig through these questions. What is missing from the story? And that's what I was saying about Snow White being so vapid. There's so much opportunity in Snow White because there's nothing there. And I think too, on the, we were talking about the villains, on the Little Red Riding Hood story, this
Yes.
wolf character.
This wolf character representing man.
Fascinating.
Well, it's essentially a werewolf story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a story to tell girls to stay on the straight and narrow path or they'll get devoured by men who are wolves.
Did you see Into the Woods?
No.
Oh man, I took Holly to see Into the Woods at the theater, and my friend who's a big theater fan, Jody, goes, that's not really a fairy tale story, right? Because it's all these twisted versions of the fairy tales. Well, Johnny Depp plays the wolf in the Little Red Riding Hood story, and he is terrifying. I mean, he has got this pedophile version of the wolf, and it's terrifying.
Oh yeah, because she's young enough to be sexually active, because that's what the red hood symbolizes, her menstruation.
Right.
But she's still too young, too naive to know much about the world.
Right.
Which is why she so happily talks to the wolf and tells him all about her life.
Right.
So that he can take advantage.
Right.
No, another great version of that was a movie, and it's on HBO Go now. It's called The Company of Wolves.
Okay.
Which is an amazing retelling of all these old werewolf stories.
Nice.
I mean, that is such a unique, different movie. I cannot recommend it more highly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, werewolves aren't really my thing. If they hadn't showed up in Twilight, I probably wouldn't care.
Not werewolf in the modern sense.
Okay.
It's the old retelling of the werewolf or the beast man sort of fairy tales.
Okay. Yeah, well, so if we go back to the 7 basic plots, the idea is the overcoming of the monster.
Right.
And in some cases, overcoming the monster is about the Jekyll and Hyde, right?
Well,
The monster in yourself.
Well, but in this particular case, the old werewolf stories were all about men who seemed to be normal on the outside, but were really beasts on the inside.
Savage.
Right, and they're always meant to be a warning to women to watch out for these kind of people.
Wow.
Because the one who is more alluring, the more daring one, eventually will tear them apart.
Okay.
Warning against the bad boy character,
Okay.
that he cannot be redeemed.
And if only Belle had watched more of that,
Yeah, exactly. Listen more to that.
she'd be more aware. All right. So some of the tips that we have, I do have a blog out here. There's some tips and some ideas of things that you can do to do a better job or to do a good job with your retelling of this. So one of the questions is, can we recast the male protagonists as female protagonists? So can you take somebody like a Robin Hood and make that a female character?
Yeah, but you have to do the total reversal, though.
You have to reverse them all. You can't
Yeah.
just reverse the protagonist.
Well, I mean, that'd be more interesting, maybe.
Okay.
Or maybe you could take Robin Hood, maybe, and a bunch of guys around her. Maybe you could do that.
I don't know. It's a little awkward. I feel like her living in the woods with a bunch of men would be awkward.
Well, it's always awkward anyway. You got Maid Marian.
True that. All right, so here we go. Here are your tips. Keep a few familiar elements, some of the things that are going to at least hearken to the original. So it could be the rules of the magic. It could be names. It could be places. We read a couple of books that they're little kid books, but they were retellings of fairy tales. One of them was about Rumpelstiltskin, and it was called Rump. And it was really cute. It was really well done. But it was when Holly was much younger. I mean, so we're talking like 2nd, 3rd grade. And they read it. We read them in another one's called Jack, where they do Jack and the Beanstalk. But anyway, it's the same author that does all of them. She keeps enough of the familiar that you know that that's what the story is. You know that you're watching the Rumpelstiltskin story. So that's key, those few elements. But you should also add something new or unexpected.
Oh, yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right. And I think that new and unexpected can't just be for shock value. It's got to have some kind of purpose. So, for example, in Rump, he doesn't know his name. He has no idea what his name is. And it's the learning of his own name is what makes him feel like a real person, somebody that people could recognize and identify. And because he's not allowed to tell anybody what his name is, that creates this like psychological drama for him. And so that's interesting too. Like create something unexpected that is going to in some way twist the story or provide additional depth to the story.
All right. I was just thinking of Twisted. You can do a version of Tangled with a man, only it's his beard hair that constantly grows out.
Oh, for goodness.
What? Well, I mean, you talk
guys
about
should
role
see the look I'm giving him right now.
the role reversal. I mean, that's the sort of thing it would have to be.
I mean,
Well, can you do a role reversal?
we're going to
Sleeping
run a
Beauty?
short story contest and have people send us these short stories.
Well, with role reversals of standard classics.
Okay.
Most of it won't work.
Beef up the characterization. Give us a backstory, some quirks, some hobbies, some fears. Mix in some other stories, right? I like the cameos. I love the fact that in Into the Woods, we get a bunch of different fairy tales sort of mismashed together.
Shrek did that well, too.
Yeah, Shrek did a great job with that. And then build a world around the story. So we go back to the Lunar Chronicles, where it's a moon-based society for the Lunar Chronicles. So build the world. And that's where you can really take some creative license. Jeffrey Maguire built such a great world in Wicked. He doesn't do any world building. He puts you right in the middle of the story. When you start reading Wicked, there's words that you don't understand, but you're not meant to understand them yet. And then after a while, after about 30 pages or so, you're so into the vocabulary he's using that you feel like you've always been in that world. He doesn't bother to go, well, this is this, and that is that, and this is this. It's not like that. It's just jump right in and go. And I thought that was really, really well done. That's where you become literary fiction instead of fan fiction, in my opinion, is when you're able to say, I'm going to suspend all the conventions of explaining everything to you, and I'm just going to put you right here in the middle of the story.
Well, let's not forget, fan fiction usually means you stick a Mary Sue character in to an already established world that's better than everyone else.
Right. Which is usually yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or thin-veiled parody of yourself. Just happens to have the same initials. Wow, I'm so clever.
We're we're going to do, that's a whole episode on the Mary Sue. If you go out to the show notes, writeonsc.blog, you'll find an entire episode of the Mary Sue where we talked about not doing that and why you shouldn't do it. Let's do some of these news items that we have from our South Carolina writers. The first one is Preston Stone, who was a contributor for our show. He actually helped us launch the show over a year ago. He wrote a piece called Two Dead, One Buried, and it's in the latest issue of Sinking Cities Digital magazine. So congratulations to Preston. Super excited for that. He shared that link on Facebook, and I was really glad to get to click through and read that story. Digital issues, digital literary journals are so accessible these days that there's a lot of opportunity to publish in them. So if you're writing short stories and you're writing poetry, you should look into publishing with some of these digital journals. It's really awesome to go in there and see the way they've been able to curate really good work. So Sinking City's latest issue has a piece from Preston Stone. Also, our South Carolina Writers Association longtime member and Greenville chapter liaison, Barbara Evers, put me on her blog. It was amazing. An Eclectic Muse. She's featuring authors in her network on the blog all month, this month and next month. So if you go out to An Eclectic Muse, Barbara Evers, you'll be able to see some of these writers that are in her network and get a little bit of information about what they're working on and what they're doing. And then the South Carolina Writers Association is partnering with the South Carolina Academy of Authors for the Carrie McRae Awards in 2020. And those awards links are up on the website now. You can get a link through our show notes on writeonsc.blog to find where those awards are and the contest that you can enter. How do you enter, submission fees and all that sort of thing. But that's in 2020. That's a collaboration between SCWA and the South Carolina Academy of Authors. And then last but not least, I want to give a shout out to Debbie Richard. She's also a South Carolina Writers Association member, and she got a 5-star review on her Audible book. And I just want to say, first of all, congratulations to Debbie. Good job. 5 stars are hard to achieve. But then also, how important are reviews? It's such a big deal. If you want to give a gift to your favorite author, go to their Amazon page, go to their Barnes & Noble page,
Goodreads.
Go to their Goodreads page, and leave them a review. If you can't leave a 3-star or higher review, please send them an email and tell them why you can't give them a higher review. But those 4-star and 5-star reviews are how your book gets higher in search results. It's how people are able to find your product and find your book. And so it really matters to get those reviews. I just want to give a little shout out to Debbie for getting one on Audible. And then also say, if you love your author friends, go out there, just spend some time, go out there and write a review for them. And it could literally just be a thumbs up. Great book. Loved this book. You should buy this book. It doesn't have to be some kind of well-written editorial, synopsis of the review or anything like that. It could just be, I loved this book, and give it 5 stars.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. What are you reading?
What am I reading? I'm reading a graphic novel at this point.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, called Kill or Be Killed.
Okay.
And it's about a guy who commits suicide and is saved by a demon. The demon demands that he goes out and kills a different person every month in order to stay alive,
okay.
Or else he'll claim his soul. Only you're not quite sure whether or not the demon is real or not, or whether it's his mental illness.
Okay. Weird.
So, yeah, it's weird, and it's addictive.
And it's a graphic novel.
Oh, yeah, it's a series of graphic novels.
Nice.
But it's just, I got immediately sucked into it.
Cool.
I mean, it's so well done.
Good.
And the art is incredible.
I'm reading a book called The Tainted Accords, and it's another young adult fantasy series. It's by Kelly St. Clair. And it's interesting, but the main character is this princess who has to wear a veil all the time. Mm-hmm. And she's just looked at herself in the mirror and told the readers why she's had to wear this veil. And it was weirdly anticlimactic. So I was like, really? That's it? All right, we're done here this week. We'll see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in. It's Right on SC on 100.7 The Point.